Hey, I want to take just a few minutes here to show you a little bit about how you export data from D2L Brightspace to Ellucian Colleague. And the data we'll be exporting will be things like attendance verification, active pursuit, midterm grade, and final grade. So let's just jump into it real quick and work our way through this, okay? So I am in my sample course right now. I am going to click on the Grades tab. In this particular sample course, we do not have the D2L gradebook built out. So there's going to be an extra click here for me. But if you are using the gradebook in D2L, you will see this screen here. Right away, you won't have that extra click. The buttons I want to select to get going with things is this Export to SIS. And it's going to take me to the screen that's going to allow me to submit my active pursuit, my attendance verification, my midterm grade, and my final grades, okay? Now, the number one thing that we have seen go wrong is folks not remembering to change the grade type, okay? So attendance verification, the very first, we're going to work backwards, I guess, if that makes any sense. We're going to work backwards. Attendance verification, the very first thing you have to submit is midterm grade 3. Okay, if you make a mistake and you submit that as a final grade rather than midterm grade 3, please reach out to the registrar's office ASAP so we can get that resolved. It will cause you problems throughout the entire semester if you have data in your final grades field before you have it populated in the other sections, okay? So make sure you're on midterm grade 3. Here I'm going to scroll down. I can see my students, my sample students in here. I can also see the name of the course here. If I had more than one section, there would be another drop down here that I could select from. And I would need to do this process for each of the sections that are cross-listed. So if it's 001, I submit everything for 001. Then I come back to the screen, I submit everything for 002, and so on until I've worked my way through all of my cross-listed sections. So for this particular course, I have already submitted some attendance verification information. And you can see Hopalong here, he got an S for attendance verification. And if I click on this little floaty arrow here, that's going to take me to the history section for this particular tab. So I can see that that S was accepted by the SIS successfully, and that when it was processed, the date and the time. But I can also go back here and I see that I made a mistake. I submitted a Z here instead of like an NS, which would be my other choice for attendance verification, right? So you can click on your floating arrow again and you can take another look. You can see that it's not a valid grade and that the SIN failed and when that happened. So in this particular case, I'm going to change my test student to NS. And the other thing I want to make sure I do is I put a check by his name. Any student without a check, their data will not be transmitted, and nothing will happen. It'll tell you that it was excluded, and that's simply because you haven't told it that this is, a user that I want to send information on. So I'm going to click and make sure I have a check mark next to his name. Now I'm going to give this student NS for attendance verification. Now this is super important. If this student has not come to my class in the attendance verification period, and I feel the need to give them an NS that it wasn't satisfactory, their attendance, I also need to click never attended. This is a really important step at this attendance verification time. If you wait till midterm to do this, it creates a lot of other problems for the student, and it has different effects financially for the college as well as the student. So if that student hasn't attended in that attendance verification period, you need to also check the never attended box. It is possible later on down the road, like if you make a mistake or there needs to be an exception made for this particular student for some reason to allow them back into class. We have other processes for that, but please don't think that you're really doing the student a big favor by skipping this particular step for that student. It is very important that we report everything accurately and on time. So in this particular case, I have the check mark next to the student's name. I have the NS. I've marked them as never attended. I'm going to go ahead and I'm going to hit that export button after I verify that I am on midterm grade 3. It's going through that process now. You can see here, it was successful. And I can see that one user was excluded and one was successful. So as I scroll down here, I can see that this user was excluded because remember I didn't put a check mark next to their name. And our second student, the data was processed for that student. I can see that it was accepted and when it happened. Now, you may occasionally see over here in your results, you might also see an error of some sort. If the system is busy with a student's record or your course list or something at the time that you process it, you may see an error pop up here. If you see an error for a given student, I encourage you to put a check mark next to that student's name and resubmit it a second time. If after the second time it doesn't go through, be sure to reach out to us at ssconline@ssc.edu. But go ahead and try submitting it a second time and always verify your history. Because if something says that there is an error or you didn't exclude it intentionally, like it means that data did not get transmitted to colleague, which means you're going to show up on that missing data report, which nobody wants, okay? So let's talk about just a couple other things that we have seen a lot of questions on. So remember that attendance verification is midterm grade 3. Active pursuit is midterm grade 2, because remember, we're submitting this in reverse order. So active pursuit is going to be the same thing. We're going to put that data in the override grade column. We're going to make sure that those students are checked off, and then we're going to hit export. In this case, I know that this data has already been sent. I can look over here, I can see when it was sent and that it was already accepted. Now I'm going to bounce over to midterm grade 1. I can see the letter grades for these students. I know that that has also been accepted. I can see it here in my history and my logs. One important thing to note with all of these fields, you need to make sure you're entering capital letters into the data field. Otherwise, if you use a lowercase letter, it'll come back as an invalid character. Or if you have a space before it or after it, it will also come back as being invalid. And then lastly, I'm going to click on my final grades tab. I can see that there's also data already entered here. I can verify that that data has been sent over by looking over here in the history and the status and the submission date. If I wanted to see more about this particular course or when things were sent over, I can actually click on the view export history as well. And I can see each time that this particular course has been processed. And if I drill into them, I can see what was processed. Was it a midterm grade 3, a midterm grade 2, 1, and so on. So things that are critically important, make sure you're using capital letters and make sure you are on the right grade tab. If you make a mistake, please let us know right away so we can get that resolved for you so you don't continue to have issues in submitting data into the semester. I'll add one last thing. It is possible over here in the history section, you may see a message come back that the student is not active in the course. If you receive this message, that's not an error. It means that student has dropped or been dropped or withdrawn for this particular course. It means you don't have to submit any additional data. There's nothing else that you need to do for that student. It's just letting you know that student is no longer active. Now, if I go to the course list, or in this case, they call it the class list in D2L, I'm not going to see that student appear on my class list anymore because they're not active, but because they were in the course at one point, The history is all stored on that SIS page, and their names will still appear there. But keep in mind again, any student you see that is listed as no longer active in the course, there's nothing else that you need to do. Okay, so if you have any questions, please feel free to reach out to us at SSC Online. Thanks so much for taking a few minutes to watch this video. I hope it made sense to you. Remember, midterm grade 3 is attendance verification. Midterm 2 is active pursuit. Midterm 1 is an actual midterm grade. And final grades are final grades. Thanks so much. Bye-bye.